But first, it's only when you have to do something yourself, isn't it, you start to really understand it. It's only when you have to get a parent into aged care, for instance, that you realise how expensive it is and how hard it is to navigate and find the right place. It's only when you try and renovate your home that you discover all the red tape around building approvals, council approvals. It's only when you try and employ someone or start a business that you encounter all the rules that kill enterprise. Well, for most of the past 18 months, with schools closed by the pandemic, parents have been part-time teachers for 35 weeks this year alone. And as well as discovering how hard it is to keep kids engaged and motivated, I reckon many parents have started to wonder just what it is that children are being taught in this country. For years now, we've been throwing money at schools because that's what the teacher unions have demanded, and because the Labor Party has turned the quantum of spending on education into the only test of commitment that both sides of politics might have to a quality education. Yet even though real spending per school student has increased 60% over the past decade, 60%, on all the international tests of comparative academic performance, Australian kids have gone from near the top of the global class to down there towards the bottom. Federal Education Minister Alan Tudge, he reckons that today's average Australian 15-year-olds are 12 months behind the learning of their counterparts back in 2000. Not overseas counterparts, Australian counterparts. Now, partly it's dud content. Trendy educational fads, for instance, such as dropping phonics for literacy in favour of the so-called whole word teaching. Partly it's misguided values, such as turning the teacher from an authority figure into some sort of guide so that kids go on a journey of self-discovery but not really learning. And partly it's the capture of the educational establishment by the ideological left determined to deconstruct everything, and especially to brand Australia's institutional structures as racist. This creeping evolution from teaching to indoctrination is epitomised by the national curriculum's insistence that every single subject be taught from an Indigenous, Asian and sustainability perspective. Now, as I pointed out last night, there's been a boil-over on this very issue in an American election, one on the back of parent power in schools against the favourite who declared that parents should have no say whatsoever over what's taught in schools. Now, here in Australia, the proposed draft national curriculum is riddled with the notion that Australia was founded on the basis of white supremacy and that much teaching is systematically racist. One extreme instance of this was 15-year-old boys in a Melbourne school recently made to stand up and apologise for being white, male and Christian. Now, the public hate this. IPA polling shows 82% of Australians disagree that students should be forced to apologise for their skin colour. 86% disagree that boys should be ashamed of being male. And 69% oppose students being taught that Australia is a racist country. Yet while the federal government complains about biased teaching, it hasn't done actually much about it. Sure, we now have parents understanding a little bit more about what goes on in class after the pandemic, but parents too have to be more vocal. Nonetheless, those quiet Australians go to the polls next year and they want the Morrison government to step up. Already the Labor states are rallying behind the draft national curriculum. And why wouldn't they? Leftist brainwashing in class? Because they think it produces future Labor voters. The Victorian Education Minister, who earlier made the gender fluidity so-called Safe Schools program compulsory, has just accused his federal counterpart of, quote, inciting culture wars. Well, maybe that's exactly what the Morrison government needs to do if it's to maximise its chance of winning a fourth term going into bat for parents. Get into these culture wars, I'll say it again, because have the fight and try and win it. This generation's philosophy of the classroom is next generation's philosophy of government. Demonstrate conviction and prove the sceptics wrong. And the best way to do that, of course, is not just to criticise the national curriculum, But please, Scott Morrison, veto it and demand back to basics teaching instead.